All right, Bob, we'll continue this session after we take this break. Thanks for hanging out with us. Little Genesis there, Land of Confusion, and bringing us back on America Now. And I suppose maybe that's why these space-borne intelligences were showing up on Earth, is because if the Greys were going to be creating a more pronounced presence, and maybe the abduction agreement hadn't yet taken place with the Earth powers in the early 50s, that these space intelligences needed to kind of get some grip on humanity and maybe open a venue so the Starseed kids could then begin to show up in succeeding generations. So you were saying that even within your family, some of the first Starseed children were from these intelligences. Is that right, Reverend?
That's correct, yeah. Both of our grandsons, right, yeah. That's correct. Wow. We've had some of our great-grandkids. We've got 9 great-grandchildren. We've got 8 great-grandboys and 1 great-granddaughter. And several of our great-grandsons are extremely intelligent. I mean, really.
Amazingly intelligent, huh?
Yeah, and they're what they call the indigo kids. They're coming in now, you know. They're coming in to do whatever they have to do, and you'll notice the fantastic changes that are occurring. I mean, every day, you know, with these young people, they're doing things that are just remarkable.
So I have a nephew that's a real wise guy. Does that count?
What now?
I said I have a nephew who's a real wise guy. Does that count?
Yeah. Well, they're that too. You know, they have quite a sense of humor. Sometimes it's a little warped, but it's still okay.
We find the same is true with a lot of phenomena.
And then also our son, you know, is he in the very early years. My daughter, when I came together with my wife in San Jose, California, she called for me. At the time, she was in Rosicrucian Order, and anyway, when I arrived at her door to give a lecture for a lot of the people that were gathered, that she got together, some of them, my friends that I had met before through Rick Williamson. But anyway, after it was all over with, my daughter, I had a ready-made family that came together as a result of her previous marriage to a gentleman who, in France 400 years ago, had me assassinated. But anyway, I have evidence and proof of all of that, which I told...
You're speaking of a past life, right?
I told Barb about, you know.
Yes, yeah, we did talk about that. In fact, we kind of had lineage that linked together.
Yeah, my name was Gaspard de Coligny, Coligny. I led all the Protestants against the Catholics 400 years ago, or over 400 years ago in France. But anyway, and my coat of arms today is the same as it was then, which I won't get into. But anyway, going back to this, my daughter came and sat on my lap eating an apple. She was about 6 years of age. We raised I've raised the kids from the time they were babies, more or less, you know. And so she sat on my lap and she said, "Where have you been? You're late. I've been looking for you. Where have you been?" And I said, "Well, I'm sorry. I got here when I could." And she said, and my wife said, "You know him?" She said, "Sure, I know him." She said, "Well, where do you know him from?" She said, "Well, don't you remember that time I was riding my white horse and I almost knocked you and Jesus down on the road? And my mouth dropped open about 10 miles. And I said, "What?" You know, and my wife said, "Well, what did you do in those days?" She said, "I was a dancer, but I danced. There was a bad king that I danced for. He liked to play with knives." Well, that was a clue to me, and I looked up here at Antipas. He had knives all over his walls.
Wow.
Yeah, so
what memories do you have?
My son come walking into the room, Eric, okay. Now in Teutonic, Eric means royal of the blood. Well, both my daughter and my son in France 400 years ago were Catherine de Medici's second son and her daughter, Elizabeth de Valois, and her son, Francois de Valois II. Okay, but anyway, we have pictures of lithographs of them and their pictures, which all match, okay. But anyway, he come walking into the room right after my daughter did this, and he started crying. And he said, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do it, I'm sorry. And my wife said, "Well, Eric, why are you upset? Why are you crying?" She said, Well, don't you remember in Atlantis when you were a priest and you gave me this crystal? You told me to be careful with it, not to burn anybody, anything with it. And I burned these people with it, and I'm sorry. And he was really crying, you know. Wow. And he also, our sources told him that he had a space name, and they gave it. And they said he will be a man among men. And we do mean a man among men. And they said our daughter would be a helper, and she's married to my son-in-law, and that's what she does. She's a good little housekeeper and a cook and so forth, and does well with her children and her home. They're right next door to us.
Uh-huh.
And I've seen them land in our back pasture one evening about 10 o'clock.
I want to spend a little bit of time talking about an old friend of yours and a semi-old friend of mine. He's passed away now. But most people that would recognize the name of Dr. Robert C. Beck would be people in scientific, innovative, and spearheading medical technologies that this guy was working on for many years. But what a lot of people that are familiar with Dr. Beck's work are unaware of is that he was associated very closely with you and with Van Tassel, and what actually got him geared towards the medical cellular rejuvenation sciences that he pioneered was actually when he got involved with Giant Rock and was hanging around with a bunch of guys like you, and Van Tassel started discussing with him the Integratron, which is basically a building that is designed to do the same thing, adjust the frequencies and reconstruct the cellular development.
He also, by the way, Joe, I told you that he originated color labs in Hollywood for the movie studios.
He sure did. And he was the inventor of the instant repeated flash, which is available on any camera nowadays. Yeah, just a great pioneering mind. But why don't you tell us
But he used to razz me, Joe. I'd be out there at the Rock, and he said, "What's the matter with you people? Are you people nuts? Are you crazy? Go home. There's no such thing as these things. You know, oh, come on, Bob. What are you doing out here? This is godforsaken. What are you doing here?" And I said, "Well, I'm out here to attend this thing. I'm interested." And he said, "Oh, come on, Bob. You got to be kidding. You think you really believe in these things?" And I said, "Yes, I do." I said, "But I do." You know, and then pretty soon he'd say, "I'm just joshing you. I'm just riding you." You know, and he'd laugh and get the biggest kick out of it.
A lot of the older guys, you know, they had a lot of fun. Long John Neville was another one that used to poke a lot of fun at people. But yeah, I mean, the seriousness. I mean, even though Dr. Beck, poked fun at it here and there, the seriousness of it.
Oh yeah,
actually led him into.
He took he was one of the very few individuals who ever took any photographs of the individuals out there visiting or speaking at the Rock. I mean,
That's right.
Really.
He's left us a wonderful legacy of photographs.
You and I have archives today because of him.
Yep. And I'm glad he took those shots. Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, he left us a wonderful legacy of that whole era, a good record. And,
absolutely.
In color at that. In color on top of that.
Yep, that's right. You know.
Let's talk about.
I got more shots, of course, of stuff out there at Giant Rock too.
Let's talk about the Integratron.
Also some of them in the early times. By the way, my wife was walking right underneath the field of the UFO that hovered over the top of the Rock. That Reserve Deputy Sheriff Ackerman took the picture of. He actually said to us, he said, "What are you people doing out here?" He said, "You ought to be ashamed of yourselves." He said, "You ought to go home. There's no such thing as flying saucers." He said, "But I was impressed to take a picture of the Rock itself." He said, and afterward, he said, "With a simple click of the shutter of my camera, I immediately become one of you, a believer." And then about 2 minutes later, he said, where did it go? Where did it go? And this half-Mexican Indian fellow, Romero, he said, "Well, Senor," he said, "it went off to the north and the east. It went away." Okay.
All right, Reverend, this is one of our long breaks coming up. These two are just jonesing to get to the Integratron topic. So when we come back, this is an 8-minute break, so hang on the phone. I want us to begin the discussion there. All right, America Now, will be right back. All right, everybody. Scott Stevens, Barb Adams, Joe Fex with you on America Now, and we're talking with Reverend Bob Short, one of the earliest contactees where it all began back in the 50s. And before we went to the break, we're talking about the Integratron?
Integratron.
Okay.
I want to know about this.
Yeah, and is that not one of the things that everybody wants is health and not to see their bodies just kind of like sag? I mean, who like